Chapter 5004. Yi Xiangnan felt that he couldn't communicate with her at all. This woman simply didn't know what was good for her. He wanted to give her the cold shoulder. So he went downstairs directly. Fortunately, he wasn't that bad and finally sent Su Mu to the news agency where she worked. Just stop at the intersection ahead, Su Mu said softly. Yi Xiangnan looked at the signboard of the news agency in front and said indifferently, "Am I shameful?" "No." Su Mu bit her lower lip. "I just think it's too ostentatious." He was driving a limited edition Bentley that cost more than 20 million. It wouldn't be good if others saw it. Yi Xiangnan looked at her. "You won't think it's ostentatious if you marry into the Yi family." Su Mu's expression was a little complicated and she didn't say anything else. Yi Xiangnan stopped the car at the intersection. Su Mu opened the door and got out of the car. He rolled down the window, but he didn't say anything with a sullen face. He couldn't suck up to a woman. Yi Xiangnan pursed his lips, put on his sunglasses and drove away slowly. It took Su Mu about 5 minutes to walk to the news agency from where she got out of the car. She had to cross the road. When she crossed the road, someone patted her on the back. Then, Xiaowen walked beside her. Su Mu was shocked at first, but she smiled when she saw that it was her. Xiaowen asked softly, "I saw you when I got off the bus. You go to work in a Bentley?" Su Mu exclaimed and wanted to say something. Xiaowen said again, "Don't say that it wasn't you. My eyes weren't playing tricks on me." The driver was a very handsome man. He was wearing sunglasses and his nose was really sharp. "Su Mu, who was that?" Su Mu said, "I hitched a ride." He was the driver. Xiaowen chuckled. "The owner of a Bentley also does this. The car fare you paid for isn't even enough for his gas." Su Mu looked at Xiaowen. Little Wen suddenly said mysteriously, "Some rich men are especially bored. They do this just to get to know beauties." "Su Mu, you have to be careful." Su Mu laughed. "I'm so ordinary. Nothing will happen to me." Little Wen didn't agree. "Su Mu, you're actually quite good-looking." Although Su Mu could only be called delicate and pretty, her figure seemed to be very good. She was thin, the kind of thin that made people want to hug her. When she said that, Su Mu just smiled. When she arrived at the news agency, everyone looked at her strangely. Su Mu wasn't a blockhead, so of course she could feel it. She and Xiao Wen looked at each other, feeling somewhat baffled. Little Wen leaned in. "You must have been seen sitting in a luxury car. Now, they're all targeting you." Pausing for a moment, he lowered his voice and said, "He probably thinks that some rich man has done that to you." Su Mu looked at him. "What?" Xiaowen felt that she really didn't get it. She coughed lightly. "He's a mistress." Su Mu replied with an "oh," and looked down at herself. "If there's really someone mistress me, I wouldn't need to come here to work. I would have long enjoyed my life." Xiaowen held her chin. "That's true. Moreover, I don't think that Su Mu is such a person. I always feel that you're the kind of person who would find a man to be your mistress after getting rich." Xiaowen laughed and joked. Su Mu's expression was indescribable. She sat down and focused on reading the documents. She heard from Sister Hong that she would be going on a business trip in 2 or 3 days. She couldn't go out and didn't know how to do anything. At this moment, the chief editor came to work. All of a sudden, no one dared to laugh anymore. Chapter 5005. Memorize. Su Mu read the information for a long time. At noon, she had a casual meal and went to the pantry to make a cup of tea. She didn't plan to rest at noon. Xiaowen said that she was silly. Did she have to work so hard for only a salary of 4,000 yuan? Sumu didn't care about that. She was a newcomer and had to work harder. When she was making tea, a fragrant breeze drifted past her. She looked up and saw Du Meili from the entertainment team. Du Meili was the chief editor's favorite and they had a special relationship. Sumu didn't want to cause trouble, so she smiled and nodded as a greeting. But Du Meili seemed to have something to say to her. She leaned against the wall and played with her nails. I heard that you drive a Bentley to work. Sumu's eyebrows twitched. She knew that this woman wasn't easy to get rid of and she didn't come with good intentions. But she didn't know Du Meili's intentions. She pursed her lips and was about to say something when Du Meili came over. The smell of perfume made Sumu choke. Can you eat such a rich man? Du Meili snorted. Sumu sighed secretly. She had a rough idea of why Du Meili was here. She was a little surprised. Didn't Xiaowen say that Du Meili was the chief editor's woman? Why? Du Meili looked at her expression and was a little annoyed. Forget it if you don't want to. What's the big deal? Who are you trying to show off? If you are really good, you would have captured a man's heart long ago. Why do you still need to work here? After saying that, she snorted again and left in her high heels. Sumu was also speechless, but there was nothing she could do. In the afternoon, the news about Sumu being cared for by a rich man spread. Her colleagues looked at her strangely and some of them even spoke in a sarcastic tone. Sister Hong couldn't stand it anymore. She came out of her private office and reprimanded them. Then she called Sumu into her office. Sister Hong was extremely strict. She asked Sumu to sit on the sofa and lit a cigarette. She asked Sumu if she wanted one, but Sumu said she didn't smoke. Sister Hong's smoking posture was very social, and she looked very straightforward. At this moment, she looked very charming. She pinched the cigarette butt and looked at Sumu. You have no problem with this business trip, right? You don't have any objections, right? If you have any problems, just tell me. I don't want to go on a business trip together. I don't want you to call me every night. Sumu was stunned for a moment. Then, she said softly, Sister Hong, you've misunderstood. That's not a panther. This morning, she didn't want to say it, but in order to dispel Hong Jie's doubts, she said, he's my husband. The one who sent you to work. Sister Hong tilted her head and asked. Sumu nodded. She asked Sister Hong to keep it a secret. Hong Jie finished smoking and looked thoughtful. After a while, she patted her shoulder. Okay, as long as you can resist the rumors, I won't say a word. It's fine as long as it doesn't affect your work. Sumu nodded. I know, Sister Hong. I'm going out to work. Hong Jie patted her shoulder vigorously. Not bad, Sumu. You're rich and handsome. In the future, you'll have a secret manual for flirting with men. Sumu lowered her eyes. I accidentally rolled around and had a child. That's how it is. Sister Hong was surprised. Sumu, who had such a boring personality, was actually so avant-garde. However, it made sense. Sumu looked like she didn't have any skills. When Sumu walked out, Xiaowen was a little worried. Did he make things difficult for you? Hong Jie couldn't stand people who were coquettish. Sumu shook her head. Xiaowen found it a little strange. Did Hong Jie change? Chapter 5006. When they got off work, the chief editor announced that they were going out for dinner, and there would be a small group activity after dinner. The staff of the club were all very happy. The two groups added up to about 20 people. They got a private room in a restaurant and ate until 10 at night. After dinner, she picked a high-end club to sing in. Normally, there wouldn't be such a high-end club, but Dreamy knew a client who gave her a VIP price. Her colleagues in the newspaper office couldn't help but be envious of her resourcefulness and flattered her. Dreamy flipped her hair, looking as if she didn't care. It was very glamorous. Sumu didn't know why she was looking at her, but she didn't care either. Dreamy saw Sumu in the bathroom and smiled. It's good to share things that you can't eat with others. You will benefit from it. Sumu was quite speechless. What could she eat? Yi Xiangnan wasn't food. She suddenly felt a little angry. She took out a piece of paper from her bag and wrote a phone number for Dreamy. It was Yi Xiangnan's private number. This is my phone number from the other end. It depends on whether you can eat it, she said and was about to leave. Dreamy pulled her back and took out her phone to dial while snorting. I have to see if there is such a number. There are so many people who play such tricks. The call went through. She was a little shocked. It was really a real number. What surprised her even more was that the phone was ringing right beside them, which was near the washroom. In the men's bathroom, a slender figure walked out, holding a phone in his hand. Sumu recognized that it was the one she bought last time and kept. And the man was none other than Yi Xiangnan. She wanted to crawl into a hole, but she was a little scared. She could only pretend that she didn't see it and quietly turned to leave. Don't go. Yi Xiangnan stopped her and looked at the phone in his hand. And the paper in Dreamy's hand. That was Sumu's handwriting. He knew it. He narrowed his eyes and looked at her quietly, as if asking for an explanation. Sumu squeezed out a smile. Team leader Du, we should go in. Just as she was about to leave, Yi Xiangnan caught her. Shouldn't I explain it to you? Sumu still played dumb. Explain. Explain what? Sumu. Yi Xiangnan glared at her. Dreamy was petrified. She really didn't expect that Sumu would be willing to share. Moreover, the other party was such a charming and noble man. But why did he look so familiar? However, for a rich and good-looking man, Dreamy would not let go of any opportunity. Besides, Zhang Fucai, that damn fatty, was called home by his wife, so she didn't need to be afraid. Moreover, if she could hook up with the men in front of her, she could even give up 100 Zhang Fucais. Dreamy showed her signature smile and moved forward, trying to let Yi Xiangnan see all her assets. Unfortunately, CEO Yi originally ran an entertainment company, so he had seen all kinds of beautiful women. A receptionist like Dreamy couldn't even be compared to her. At most, she was just a little more coquettish. He ignored this woman and just stared at Sumu. He couldn't wait to take her home immediately and teach her a lesson. What did she think of him as? Was he just a flower? Yi Xiangnan was angry at the thought of it, and he glared at Sumu. Sumu actually had the courage to introduce him. This is Mr. Yi, and this is Miss Du from our newspaper office. That's all. She withdrew her hand and wanted to escape. Chapter 5007. It's free. But Yi Xiangnan didn't let go of her. But Yi Xiannan refused to let go. She gritted her teeth and said, "What about you? Why don't you introduce us to each other?" Ha! He was curious about what she had said about him in the newspaper office. Did she say that he was a sugar daddy or something? Congratulations, Mr. Yi, you're right. Sumu blinked. Us? It's the kind of relationship that others think. Yi Xiangnan shook off her hand angrily and stared at Dreamy. You'd better forget this number. He didn't like this kind of woman at all. Even now, he wanted to strangle Sumu, this hateful woman. He glared at Sumu again and went to his private room. He always had something important to do. Otherwise, he would have dealt with her now. After he left, Dreamy came back to her senses first. Her voice was a little light. This man is really hard to serve. Zhang Fucai was a little fat. He wasn't very rich, but he had tender feelings for women. The man just now had a strong aura, and he definitely wasn't the kind to let women pamper women. Sumu must have suffered a lot in his hands. Just thinking about it made Dreamy feel better. She didn't know what Sumu would use to exchange for her vanity. She hoped that it would be as miserable as she thought. Later, they went to the private room together. The atmosphere inside was just right. Seeing them enter, she immediately pulled them over to sing and have fun. Sumu didn't drink, but today was a special day, so she still drank a small glass. Then she refused to drink again. Later, when someone came to persuade her, Sister Hong helped her. Everyone could see that Sister Hong liked Sumu very much. Usually, Sister Hong didn't meddle in other people's business and didn't have much contact with the people in the club. But she was very special to Sumu. Some people even guessed that Sister Hong had a special feeling for Sumu. But they only dared to say it quietly. Dreamy was singing "Bitter Brother" on the side. She had been very bitter today. She wanted to find a rich man, but she ended up being humiliated. She just couldn't understand why that man would like Sumu but not her. Which part of her was inferior to Sumu? As he sang, he looked at Sumu. He felt that she had no face, no figure, no face, no body, nowhere. It was too common. Dreamy's song was even more poignant and beautiful. Later on, she also said some other things, all of which were bitter and unkind. Sister Hong tried to stop Dreamy for a while. In the end, she also felt that Dreamy was a little unreasonable. She took advantage of Zhang Fucai's love and hooked up with other men. Zhang Fucai really couldn't change his ways. Sister Hong thought to herself, that person is just like that. He won't change for the rest of his life. Later, Xiaowen secretly told Sumu that Zhang Fucai was Sister Hong's ex-husband. He divorced Dreamy because he cheated on her. However, Dreamy was smart. How could she be willing to marry Zhang Fucai? On one hand, she kept him hanging, greedy for some benefits, and on the other, she played around outside. Compared to Dreamy, the chief editor was considered pure and innocent. Sister Hong drank a lot of wine and took out a cigarette. It was quite tempting. Sumu felt that it was getting late, but she felt that she had to look after Sister Hong. Usually, Sister Hong took care of her. Therefore, she had been enduring. She didn't really like such occasions, but since she was working, she had to be more sociable. Speaking of which, most of the people who worked in the newspaper office were good at socializing. This was because they usually had to serve the advertisers. If she wanted to build a relationship, should she accompany them for a drink? Should she say some good words? That was a must. Sumu wasn't so naive to think that she only needed to do a good job in the interview. The culture of drinking was prevalent everywhere. Chapter 5008. Sister Hong turns her head and squints at her. She probably guesses Sumu's thoughts and smiles. I'm fine. If you want to go back, you can go back first. This little wine is nothing to me. Sumu nods and plans to go back first. She goes to bed very early. As soon as she reveals this intention, Dreamy says faintly, "Are you going to accompany Mr. Yi?" "Sumu, why don't you introduce him to us?" Sumu felt that she was endless. Was it because she didn't want to give up when a man didn't show interest in her? Sumu doesn't want to pay attention to her, but she has to. Senior Du, he is just my friend. There is no need to accompany him. She regrets to death now. She shouldn't have given Yi Xiangnan's phone number to her in a fit of anger. Now it's all right. They will be entangled in the future. She doesn't know whether Yi Xiangnan will punish her when he is drunk. Su Mu thinks that if she has her mother's family to rely on, she must hide tonight. But she is alone, and there is no way to hide. Besides, she is in the wrong tonight. His identity is there. No matter how angry she is, she shouldn't give his number to Du Meili. She is angry with her. Thinking about it, Su Mu has a headache. Du Meili is in a bad mood. She won't listen to her and wants to make her drink. Sister Hong is unhappy. She says with a cold face, Du Meili, there is a limit to your jokes. Don't bully Su Mu just because she is honest. Du Meili and Sister Hong are enemies. Wearing a tight dress, she leans against the sofa and flips her wavy hair. She is charming and breathes like orchids. Sister Hong, don't you hate mistresses the most? Su Mu is a mistress, and she is a very rich one. Don't you care about it? As she said this, she laughed mockingly. Don't you hate evil the most? Sister Hong was very experienced. How could she be frightened by Du Meili's words? She lit another cigarette and smoked quietly. Who told you that Su Mu is a mistress? Du Meili, don't think that everyone in the world is a mistress because you are not upright. Du Meili smiles and flips her hair again. Her sugar daddy is here. I don't know which room he is in. Anyway, Su Mu offended him today. She is in a hurry to go back to please him. I don't know if she will be skinned. As she spoke, her laughter was extremely exaggerated, and she was extremely gloating. Shaowen said in a low voice, ignore her. Don her. Sister Hong directly said, Du Meili, do you have a psychological problem? If you're sick, go to see a doctor. Zhang Fucai will definitely approve your leave. For do again. For do Jiang. However, people were realistic. Most of them sided with Du Meili. After all, Sister Hong and the chief editor were already divorced. The room is in chaos. Most of them are blaming Su Mu. For a moment, the room is in chaos. Most of them are blaming Su Mu, the mistress. Sister Hong looks at her. Do you still want to hide it? Do you want to clear your name? Su Mu doesn't think it is necessary. Sister Hong doesn't know Yi Xiangnan's identity. If she says it, there will be more trouble in the future. It is more troublesome than being a mistress. At this moment, the door of the room opens. The person who enters surprised everyone. Especially Du Meili. She stops singing and looks at Yi Xiangnan with a look that says, I'm beautiful. Are you here to look for me? Yi Xiangnan doesn't care about her. He says a few words on his phone and looks at Su Mu. Mom called to say that Cymbidium chinense has a low fever. She is asking for Mom. Are you done here? Come with me to the old mansion. Chapter 5009. Su Mu was stunned for a moment. Then, she couldn't care less about anything else. She grabbed her jacket and walked out with Yi Xiangnan. Everyone was stunned as well. They hadn't expected that such a handsome man would be Su Mu's husband. Was he the one who drove the Bentley in the morning? He looked like he was. The watch on his wrist was worth a few million, and he exuded an air of nobility. Moreover, he looked familiar. She didn't know where she had seen him before. Su Mu nodded at Sister Hong at the door. I'll get going then. Sister Hong nodded. Go ahead. She even had a cigarette in her hand. Even Yi Xiangnan couldn't help but take a second look at her. At this moment, Du Meili cried out, didn't you say that he's your sugar daddy? Why are they husband and wife? They had a child. And they looked like an old married couple. What was wrong with this world? Yi Xiangnan heard Du Meili shouting. He took a look and recognized that it was the woman from before. He was a little disgusted. What kind of environment did Sumu work in? He frowned. When did I become a sugar daddy? Sumu, you'd better give me an explanation when you get back. Sumu didn't say anything. On one hand, she was worried about Xiangnan. On the other hand, she knew that he wouldn't let her off. Yi Xiangnan paused for a moment before saying, I'm Sumu's husband. Put tonight's expenses on my tab. Put it on his tab. Who was he? He didn't even need to tell her his name. Everyone knew how to make empty promises. Someone was shouting. In the private room, everyone was talking about Sumu's husband. He looked rich and handsome, but did he only have a luxury car and Sumu, a wife who couldn't be seen in public? When Du Meili heard this, her mood became better. The people around her started to flatter her again. Sisterly, your VIP card is really useful. You're not like some people who only know how to say cheap words. Let's see how Sumu will explain tomorrow. Do you think she came out to work just to make up for the man? That man doesn't look like he's working. Could it be that his family is in debt and he's living a miserable life now? Sister Hong has been smoking. Hearing that they are getting more and more outrageous, she pinches out the cigarette and snorts, that's enough. Sumu's husband is Mr. Yi. Just put it on his head. Mr. Yi, which Mr. Yi? Cried someone. We've never heard of him. At this time, Du Meili's expression was already very bad. She remembered which Mr. Yi in B City was so young, handsome, rich, and surnamed Yi. It was Yi Xiangnan, the president of Stars Entertainment. They did get married recently. His wife didn't look very good and his child was several years old. It turned out to be Sumu. She gnashed her teeth. At this time, Sister Hong also said faintly, Mr. Yi, the president of Stars Entertainment. For a moment, the private room was silent and everyone was stunned. Star. Light. Always. Cut. These 4 words deeply shocked their fragile hearts. Sister Hong, you mean Sumu's husband, is the president of Stars Entertainment. Xiaowen couldn't digest such a complete sentence. Sister Hong nodded and squinted at her. Yes, you can't see it. This is low-key. Sister Hong, you already knew it. Xiaowen asked with a smile. Sister Hong pinched out the cigarette. I knew she had a husband, but I didn't know he was Mr. Yi. Besides, the news in the morning was so ridiculous. It seems that Sumu is not a mistress. Because she doesn't look good. Some people still wanted to support Du Meili, but they gave up halfway. They didn't have enough confidence. She married Mr. Yi. Why would she be a mistress? Chapter 50:10. Updated quickly, Du Meili had suffered a double loss on this day. She had lost all her face. She gritted her teeth as though she had swallowed a barrel of dynamite. No one dared to comfort her, so she could only wait for Zhang Fucai to do it. After Sister Hong left, the usual bootlickers went up to Du Meili one by one to comfort her. After all, they were the chief editor's sweetheart. It was late at night. The white Bentley wasn't going too fast on the road in the middle of the night. Sumu leaned against the back of the seat and asked softly, Yi Xiangnan, have you been drinking? Yi Xiangnan held the steering wheel with both hands, surprised that she was talking to him. He turned his head to look at her. Her eyes were slightly narrowed, and her lips were especially red as she spoke softly. Her long black hair was spread out at this moment, and it was a rather ugly sight. He knew that she was drinking, which was why she looked like that. Thinking about those colleagues, men and women, she was already this drunk. If he wasn't around, would she have been sent back by the male colleagues, and something indescribable would have happened in her rundown house? Just the thought of it made Yi Xiangnan burn with rage. He tugged at his tie and said in a bad tone, "No one can force me to drink." "Su Mu, are you going to work or to sell yourself? Who are those people?" "Oh right, did you tell others that I'm your sugar daddy? Do you want to introduce me to others? Am I that kind of person?" Su Mu was a little annoyed, and she felt that he was like an old lady. She turned her head to the other side. Yi Xiangnan was even angrier. She was clearly in the wrong, so how could she still be angry at him? Actually, Su Mu would definitely feel guilty usually, but now that she was drunk, she was a little delicate. She leaned against the back of the seat and listened to what he was saying. It was quite hypnotic. Later on, she fell asleep and didn't wake up even when they reached Wen Garden. Yi Xiangnan was annoyed and amused at the same time. He had asked her to come over to take care of Cymbidium chinense, but she had fallen asleep straight away. He opened the car door and carried her out of the car. Wen Yuan was still awake. He walked up to her and was surprised. Su Mu is asleep. There was also a slight smell of alcohol. Did the child drink? She touched Su Mu's face. Yi Xiangnan replied calmly, "She accompanied me to socialize. We just had a drink." Wen Yuan blamed his son. "You know that Su Mu can't hold her liquor well. She was sick last time, and now you're torturing her again." Yi Xiangnan smiled and said, "Mom, do you only love her now and not me?" Wen Yuan glanced at him and felt that his son was in a good mood. To be honest, Su Mu wasn't very beautiful, but her temperament was quite suitable for Xiangnan. Xiangnan was usually too arrogant, and it needed someone like Su Mu to control him. Wen Yuan thought about it and felt that it was reasonable. Yi Xiangnan carried Su Mu upstairs, and Wen Yuan followed behind him. He asked softly, "Where's Cymbidium chinense? Is it asleep?" Su Mu nodded. "Yes, it's finally asleep." Yi Xiangnan smiled. "It's probably because it's too excited since it's just started school." Wen Yuan had a lot to say when it came to his grandson, but he stopped when they reached the second floor. "Take Wen Yuan to your room to sleep. I'll cook a bowl of noodles for you." Yi Xiangnan smiled. "Thank you, Mom." Wen Yuan looked at him and pursed his lips. She had 2 children. Yi Hui was more liked by the elders. After all, she was a girl. But she cared more about Xiangnan. Xiangnan had a bad temper. Besides, he had been through a lot. She didn't know if her son could still be happy in the future. Chapter 50:11. Fortunately, he quite liked Su Mu. His fondness for her was a little complicated. But a mother knew her son best. She knew that Xiangnan liked Su Mu. She went downstairs and cooked for her son. All these years, Wen Yuan had lived like a prince, but he was still very devoted to his son and daughter. From time to time, he would cook noodles or something. Yi Xiangnan brought Wen Yuan to his room. This was the first time they were spending the night at his parents' place. His room was on the second floor. Because the room was large, about 90 square meters, there was a balcony that had sunlight, but at this moment, the moonlight seeped in. The moonlight was clear. The night was beautiful. He only turned on a small night light, put Wen Yuan on the big bed, and covered him with a blanket. Just as he was about to leave, she grabbed his hand. "Ha!" Yi Xiangnan lowered his head. Wen Yuan buried his face in the pillow, and his voice was lazy. "Didn't you say that you want to take care of Cymbidium chinense? Yi Xiangnan, carry Cymbidium chinense over. I want to sleep with Cymbidium chinense. He looked at her and was very surprised. Her voice was a little soft and lazy, as if she was acting coquettishly. He had never seen Sumu like this. The Sumu he had seen was always a little tense and not very willing to get close to others. Yi Xiangnan bent over and chuckled. Cymbidium chinense is asleep. I'll accompany you later, okay? No. She buried her face in the pillow again. Perhaps she felt comfortable, and she even rubbed it a few times. He couldn't help but laugh. Sumu was completely drunk and fell asleep in a short while. Yi Xiangnan pinched her face and laughed silently. After a while, he felt a little annoyed. He didn't know how to be gentle, and he pinched her face hard. Sumu woke up from the pain and slapped him on the face without thinking. Even with her eyes closed, she was precise and precise. Yi Xiangnan was stunned at first, then he gritted his teeth. You bully me even when you're asleep, don't you? He wanted to call her back when she was drunk. She wouldn't know anyway. But as soon as he touched it, he changed his mind. He was a man. Why would he bother with a drunk woman? Letting her go, he went downstairs. When Yuan had already prepared the noodles and was waiting for his son, Yi Xiangnan sat at the dining table. He was indeed hungry. He ate very quickly, but his behavior was still elegant. After all, he was born here. When Yuan looked at him and smiled. What are your plans with Sumu? Plan? What's your plan? Yi Xiangnan looked up and asked. When Yuan said softly, wedding. Don't tell me you don't want to hold a wedding. The child is already so big. Sumu is also a girl. Which girl doesn't want a wedding? Yi Xiangnan slowed down his eating speed and smiled. Mom, Sumu and I are not what you think. It's not what I think, but it's almost the same. Don't tell me you don't want to. You've been like this since you were young. The more you want something, the more you refuse to say it. You don't mean it. Yi Xiangnan couldn't help but laugh again. He shook his head and didn't say anything. After eating the noodles, he took out a cigarette, lit it, and smoked slowly. After a moment, he said in a low voice, before the accident, Sumu had someone she liked in university. I know. It's Lawyer Shin, isn't it? When Yuan nodded understandingly. Didn't you like Yi Huan for many years? We're even. Yi Xiangnan looked at his mother silently and then said, that's different. I've already let it go. I'm also sincerely living with Sumu. She doesn't want me to go out and mess around, and I don't want to mess around, but she doesn't want to make do with a marriage without love. Chapter 50-12. At this point, Yi Xiangnan could not help but grumble, Mum, how old is she? She's still looking forward to love. He liked her and thought that she was interesting and that they could live together. But love was not something that could be given out just because he wanted to. When Yuan looked at his son and said with a straight face, Sumu is only 23 years old. Why can't she look forward to love? Even if she's 32, she has the right. She glared at her son again. As for you, you're already 30 years old and you still can't settle down. You're almost old enough to be her uncle, yet you're still so picky. It's fine if someone doesn't despise you. Yi Xiangnan was speechless. What do you mean she doesn't despise me? She despises me too. When Yuan held back his laughter. Then we'll have to find the reason from you. Even if you don't respect her, you have to respect your wife. At the mention of this, Yi Xiangnan could not help but ask, how am I not respecting her? When have I not introduced her as my wife outside? But she's fine. Mum, do you know what she says about me outside? She says that I'm her sugar daddy. When Yuan burst out in laughter before looking at his son and saying softly, "Did she really say that outside?" Yi Xiangnan snorted a little proudly. When Yuan found it rather interesting. "Then you should give her some pocket money. If you ask me, you should give her a villa to live in. Look at Su Mu's life right now. Which part of it looks like you're taking care of everything? I'll feel embarrassed for you if I tell others." Yi Xiangnan looked at his mother silently and put out his cigarette. She doesn't want to. She only has Shen Wenshuan in her heart. What can I do? Thinking about it, he felt wronged. When Yuan was both worried and amused at the same time. Even Yi Huan would not let her son suffer like this. She pursed her lips. All right, go to sleep. Stop messing around. Su Mu has just started work. Don't let her ask for leave all the time. Young Master Yi was very unhappy. Mother, you make me sound like a beast. Men are no different from beasts. When Yuan smiled. His expression seemed to be filled with joy, making one feel rather speechless. Yi Xiangnan slowly went upstairs. He wasn't in a hurry to sleep, so he went to check on his son first. Cymbidium chinense fever had subsided, and it seemed to be sleeping soundly. He was wearing a set of one-piece pajamas, and his eyes and brows were exquisite. He looked exactly the same as he did when he was young. He liked it, but also felt a little regretful. The child was completely like him. There was not a single part of her that resembled Su Mu. He actually felt that something was missing. At least there was one part that resembled her. Anyway, she wasn't ugly, so it wouldn't affect him much. As she thought of this, her fingertips gently touched her son's face. Her skin was thin and soft, and because she was sleeping, her body temperature was a little higher. It was so warm that it made people want to hug her to sleep. Yi Xiangnan's face was filled with gentleness. He would only reveal such an expression when he was facing Cymbidium chinense. When Yuan came in from the door. Xiangnan, go to sleep. Your dad and I will take turns to look at her at night. Don't worry, nothing will happen. Yi Xiangnan was naturally not worried. He just felt that his parents were working hard. When Yuan smiled. What's there to work hard about? Your dad and I aren't that old. Besides, Cymbidium chinense is really obedient. Su Mu has really brought him up well. Yi Xiangnan nodded his head. That's right. This child is really sensible. He didn't look like he was brought up by a single mother at all. Instead, he looked like he had received a good education. This was probably Su Mu's greatest strength. Therefore, Yi Xiangnan always felt that it was good for her to stay at home and take care of the child. Chapter 50:13. Back in his bedroom, he took a shower, smoked a cigarette on the balcony, and then went to bed. That night, he didn't make things difficult for Su Mu. Besides, he was also a little tired. There were a lot of things to do in the company recently, and he spent too much energy paying attention to Su Mu. If she didn't want to, he wouldn't force her. So be it for now. Yi Xiangnan closed his eyes and didn't fall asleep for half an hour. Finally, he took Su Mu over. Smelling the smell of her hair, he felt that it smelled very good. It was strange. At that time, her private room was also smoky, but she just didn't get that smell. There was still a delicate fragrance on her hair. Yi Xiangnan thought in a daze that the smell of this shampoo was quite good. Just like that, he slowly fell asleep. It was very late at night. It was also very cold. Winter was coming soon, but the bedroom was warm. When Su Mu woke up, it was already early in the morning. She had something on her mind, so she woke up automatically in the morning. She sat up immediately and rubbed her eyes. Where was this? The sunlight came in through the white gauze, and the light was very good. The room was like a suite. The color of the furniture was gray and black, very masculine. She immediately looked beside her, and an arm was lying there. Then she moved to the man's face, and she breathed a sigh of relief. It was Yi Xiangnan. Yi Xiangnan also woke up, but he wasn't fully awake yet, and he didn't have enough sleep. His face buried in the pillow, he laughed hoarsely. Mrs. Yi, are you a little disappointed to see me? There's nothing to be disappointed about. Sumu felt that he was really bored. She lifted the quilt and wanted to get up, but he pulled her down again. Sleep with me for a while. Yi Xiangnan's voice was a little hoarse. Sumu waited quietly for a few seconds, and said softly, I want to go to see Cymbidium chinense. My parents will take care of it. What's there to worry about? Yi Xiangnan just wouldn't let her go. He was someone who had a bad temper when he woke up. Sumu was still struggling. You can't do that. This is outrageous. As Sumu spoke, she was about to get up. This time, Yi Xiangnan put her down and sat up. He leaned against the headboard lazily and watched her look for clothes to wear. He found it a little funny. Do you care so much about what my parents think? Fortunately, we don't live together. Otherwise, what would you do? Sumu put on her jacket. I don't know what you're talking about. Also, Yi Xiangnan, don't bring me to sleep in your room in the future. It's not good. We're not in that kind of relationship. He was wearing a bathrobe, and he looked good leaning against the wall. His skin was good, and a simple bathrobe was enough to make people unable to take their eyes off him. Yi Xiangnan smiled gently. Then tell me what our relationship is. Sumu, as long as you say it, I will definitely do it. The last 3 words were a little ambiguous. Sumu glared at him again. She went to brush her teeth and wash her face. Then, she went to see Cymbidium chinense. The little guy was very obedient. He had already sat up by himself, but he hadn't gotten up yet. Sumu walked over and said with a smile, Little friend, are you better today? Cymbidium chinense was very happy. Mom, I dreamed that you came over. When I woke up, you really came over. The little guy said and threw himself into her arms. I'm so happy. Sumu saw that he was very energetic and happy. She sat by the bed and asked, what did the baby dream about? She was very gentle. She had always been gentle to Cymbidium chinense. Cymbidium chinense's eyes were sparkling. I dreamed that Mom coaxed me to sleep. At this time, the door was pushed open, and Yi Xiangnan came in. Chapter 50:14. Cymbidium chinense immediately called out, Dad. Yi Xiangnan went over and sat beside Sumu. He quietly hugged Sumu and Cymbidium chinense together. He lowered his head and looked at Cymbidium chinense's little head. There was a smile in his voice. What are you talking about? Cymbidium chinense's voice lowered. I'm saying that I dreamed that Mom coaxed me to sleep. Then, Yi Xiangnan said something quite shameless. Your mom coaxed Dad to sleep last night. Cymbidium chinense opened his eyes wide. He looked at his father and then at his mother. There was a touch of confusion in his big eyes. After a while, he said in a crisp voice, Dad is lying. Dad is an adult. Why would he need Mom to coax him to sleep? Sumu wanted to dig a hole and bury herself. Yi Xiangnan's wife was hateful. However, Yi Xiangnan didn't feel that he was hateful at all. He smiled and dragged Cymbidium chinense to lie down with him. Sleep with Dad for a while. Sumu felt quite speechless. Yi Xiangnan, it's 7 o'clock. You still let your son sleep with you? Yi Xiangnan hugged his son and said shamelessly, yes, I just let my son accompany me. You made a scene last night. What's wrong with me letting my son accompany me now? Cymbidium Chinense was hugged tightly by his father. His little face was red and he felt a little uncomfortable. However, such a hug was something he had been missing since he was a child. He couldn't resist it. Cymbidium Chinense looked at his mother pitifully. He hoped that his mother would agree. Yi Xiangnan didn't care what Sumu thought. He hugged his son and said, take a day off today. Sleep with Dad. He added, Mom won't accompany you, but our Cymbidium Chinense will. Cymbidium Chinense didn't really understand what the adults were saying. It just stared at them with its adorable big eyes and didn't know what to do. Yi Xiangnan was done playing. He suddenly patted his son. All right, get up. Did you really expect to sleep in all day? Cymbidium Chinense was dumbfounded by his antics. He was speechless for a long time. Sumu was also shocked. She never thought that he would play a trick on Xiangnan. He was really too evil. Yi Xiangnan chuckled. Do you really think it's better to let him sleep for a day? Sumu was speechless. She snorted softly. I didn't say that. Then get up. He kissed his son. It's time for school. Boys shouldn't stay in bed. Humph, this rascal. His wife didn't accompany him. She came to accompany this rascal. Sumu was surprised and speechless. Was this Yi Xiangnan's revenge? She stared at Yi Xiangnan and was very suspicious. Yi Xiangnan just looked at her and then snorted and walked back. He was still wearing that showy bathrobe. Sumu was especially speechless. She could only look at Cymbidium Chinense. Cymbidium Chinense was crying because its feelings were cheated by its father. It turned out that when men lied to others, they were like this. The little Cymbidium Chinense had to bear things that he shouldn't have at such a young age. Sumu was also very speechless. She smiled. All right, don't cry. Get up and go to school. Cymbidium Chinense wiped away its tears. Dad is so hateful. Sumu also smiled. She felt that Yi Xiangnan was really boring. Cymbidium Chinense put on its own clothes. She went to Yi Xiangnan's room. When she opened the door, she was stunned. Yi Xiannan was in the middle of changing when she saw the door open. She tore off her bathrobe and threw it at Sumu's face, covering it. His voice was indifferent. Are you still angry? Sumu tore off the bathrobe. You shouldn't have played a trick on him. Chapter 50-15. Yi Xiangnan looks at her and puts on his clothes one by one. She turns to Jun Yan with a smile. Shouldn't you tease him? Sumu, what about you? Should you tease me? Sumu put his bathrobe in the bathroom and wanted to turn around to explain to him, but he came up to her without saying a word. He lowers his head and puts his chin on her shoulder intimately. Tell me, don't you want to explain to me? This kind of behavior was really too intimate. Sumu is speechless. She looks at him for a long time and whispers, there's nothing to explain. That's it. I don't want others to know that I'm married to you. She wants to get rid of him, but Yi Xiangnan is like a sticky candy. She can't get rid of him. Sumu is a little angry. Yi Xiangnan, we're going to send Cymbidium Chinense to school in a while. Can you? We're married, aren't we? He holds her gently with one hand. This is the Sumu you mentioned. Sumu is stunned for a moment, and then realizes that what she said is indeed ambiguous. She changes her words. I mean, get a certificate. Getting a certificate is equal to getting married. Is that what you mean, Mrs. Yi? Yi Xiangnan refuses to let her go, and then he chuckles. Then why don't you go back with me? Su Mu can't bear it anymore. That's two different things. He chuckles. Do you prefer me to raise you outside and be a canary? If that's the case, it's not impossible for me. Do you like to live in a villa or a penthouse apartment? I think an Anne's 500 square meters is good. Your bed is too hard. I don't like it very much. Su Mu feels that he is simply too shameless. He is really shameless. Yi Xiangnan also wanted to continue teasing her, but time didn't allow for it. He raised his hand to look at his watch and said regretfully, "All right, time to send Xiangnan to school." He stretched his body and said, "I'll deal with you later." Su Mu pursed her lips and followed him downstairs. She did not dare to go against Wen Yuan. After all, there were elders around. Downstairs, Cymbidium Chinense was already having breakfast. Wen Yuan and Yi Mubai were taking care of her, their eyes full of love. Su Mu also felt that it would be better for Cymbidium Chinense to follow them than her. At least, he could be taken good care of and wouldn't be left alone at home. However, she would miss him. Su Mu had thought of compromising, mostly for the sake of Cymbidium Chinense. She was now in a delicate situation in the Yi family. When Yuan looked up and saw her, he smiled and said, "You're here. Come and eat." As he said that, he beckoned them over. Su Mu greeted the two elders and ate breakfast in silence. Yi Mubai had a good impression of her. Judging from the upbringing of Cymbidium Chinense, he knew that Su Mu had a good character. Therefore, he didn't say anything when his wife doted on Su Mu more. When Yuan said, "I don't know where Yi Hui has gone these days. She always runs out from time to time." Su Mu smiled. She also liked Yi Hui, but Yi Hui always put her and Yi Xiangnan together, which was a little unbearable. Yi Xiangnan looked at her and probably knew what she was thinking, so he just smiled. After eating, he raised his hand and looked at the time. "Mom, it's getting late. I'll take Su Mu to work. You and Dad can take Cymbidium Chinense to work. I'm running out of time." Of course, Wen Yuan has no objection. It's good to let her spend more time with her baby grandson. Chapter 50:16. Su Mu was like a wooden person. She said without thinking, "I'll take a taxi myself. You can send Cymbidium Chinense." She felt that Cymbidium Chinense had been sticking to her recently. It must be because she wanted her father to send her. However, as soon as she finished speaking, the three members of the Yi family stared at her. Needless to say, Yi Xiangnan was the unhappy one. When Yuan and Yi Mubai looked at each other, they had confirmed each other's eyes. They all understood. Su Mu really didn't like their son. She didn't even want to sit in his car. Young Master Ye's expression was extremely dark and he couldn't find a way out of this situation. At this time, Cymbidium Chinense said in a low voice, "Dad, send Mom. Mom can't be late for work." Yi Xiangnan suddenly felt that he didn't have a son. He looked at Su Mu with a faint smile. Su Mu was also speechless. She didn't say anything. She just brushed her hair. After breakfast, he drove her to work. Su Mu wanted to stop at the intersection in front. Yi Xiangnan didn't listen to her and drove the car directly to the newspaper office. The car stopped and he turned his head. "Is it necessary? I'm not a shameful person." Su Mu looked down. "You're too high profile." He chuckled and looked not very friendly. "Su Mu, Do you know that the most high-profile thing you've done is giving birth to Cymbidium chinense? Are you saying that I shouldn't have given birth to him? Su Mu asked. Yi Xiangnan was stunned by her question. Then he chuckled. Are you blaming me? That time was a complete accident, and she went to the wrong room. Besides, it was early in the morning. He only knew that something had happened. He didn't even know what the woman looked like. In other words, he was the passive one. Su Mu pursed her lips. No. Yi Xiangnan smiled. Are you blaming me for the last 2 rounds? In that case, it wouldn't be an accident, but a deliberate action. Su Mu's face instantly turned red. She felt that he was particularly shameless. She glared at him. Are you running out of time? After saying that, he opened the door and got out. Outside the car door, Xiao Wen and 2 colleagues were standing there like statues. She had a motherly smile on her face. Su Mu's face was as red as a tomato again. It was hard for people not to think dirty thoughts. Su Mu bit her lip. It's not what you see. At this moment, Yi Xiangnan rolled down the car window. His sunglasses were so beautiful that it was suffocating. I'll pick you up after work. Don't wander around. He paused. It's the old man's birthday in a few days. Go and see what you can give him. This old man was none other than Yi Jinggang. A man who was racing against the heavens. As soon as he spoke, Little One and the rest almost suffocated. Oh my God, they were really husband and wife. Su Mu was a little embarrassed and didn't know what to say. Yi Xiangnan glanced at her again, then rolled up the car window and drove away. As soon as the car drove away, the few of them covered their faces and screamed. Oh my God, it's true. Little Wen said in a dirty manner, Su Mu, how does it feel to live with a super handsome guy every day? Su Mu looked at her and pursed her lips. I feel it. She curved her lips slightly. Feeling it is, no feeling at all. They didn't live together, but she didn't tell Little One and the rest in detail. Little One was still stimulated. The few of them followed her and chattered all the way to the newspaper office. After arriving at the newspaper office, the treatment they received was like ice and fire. Du Meili's group didn't dare to pay attention to Su Mu because they still had to respect Du Meili's mood. The other group of people flattered Su Mu, including Chief Editor Zhang. Chapter 50-17. The editor-in-chief always knew that Su Mu came in through the back door. The president told him that she was recommended by an important person and asked him to promote her. He even said that he was really here to learn something, not to pass the time. Her background was deep. But the editor-in-chief didn't expect that she was so unfathomable. This was simply the star of South Africa. The editor-in-chief wished he could give his office to Su Mu. Everything Su Mu said was good and right. Therefore, he also doubted whether it was too rough to let Su Mu follow Sister Hong. Mrs. Yi was such a delicate person. If she lost a hair in another city, how could he compensate her? So he thought about it and called Su Mu to his office. He asked his staff to make the tea that he had treasured for a long time and personally brought it to Su Mu. When he sat down, his tone was completely different. Little Su, after knowing your real identity, I was very uneasy. I thought of many plans. You see, my hair has turned white. Su Mu was also quite speechless. The editor-in-chief was really exaggerated. She thought about it and euphemistically said that she wanted to follow Sister Hong to learn. Business trips were not a problem. The editor-in-chief was very moved. He called Sister Hong and told her again. Sister Hong smiled. If Su Mu is delicate, I won't follow her. She patted Sumu on the shoulder. I have faith in you. Do it well. Sumu nodded. Sister Hong stayed, and Sumu went out. As soon as the door was closed, Zhang Fucai looked at his ex-wife and lowered his voice. Be careful. Nothing can go wrong. If anything goes wrong, our newspaper office will be finished. If he had known earlier, he would not have let Sumu follow Sister Hong. It was easy and safe to run entertainment news. Their newspaper office could also get dividends. It was killing two birds with one stone. He regretted it. But it was too late for regrets. Sister Hong smoked a cigarette and looked at Chief Editor Zhang. I know what I'm doing. Even if I'm done for, I have to protect Sumu. It was not because she was great, but because she was a senior. Since Sumu was with her, it meant that she had to protect Sumu. If anything were to happen, she would naturally be the one to handle it. Hearing Sister Hong's words, Zhang Fucai felt very uneasy. He took a sip of tea and said, What nonsense are you talking about? Of course there won't be any problems. He loved, hated, feared, and felt ashamed of Sister Hong. A few years ago, he had done something wrong to her, and this woman had left without looking back. There was no need for any explanation. He knew that she had a fiery temper, so he didn't ask for it later. He knew what kind of person Dreamy was. Firstly, she was a glutton. Secondly, she fell. What else could they do when they were divorced? Dreamy refused to marry him, so he found a primary school teacher to live with. His child was already 2 years old. However, after enjoying the warmth of his wife and child, as well as Dreamy's charm, he would still occasionally think of Sister Hong, the woman who had struggled with him. But it was already a thing of the past. He knew that she would occasionally make friends with a man. He didn't feel good about it, but he had never asked. Because they had been divorced for several years. Sister Hong went out and walked to Sumu. She patted her on the shoulder and said, Come to my place to get some information. It will be used in a few days. This time, they were going to Sea City to deal with the pollution problem of a certain manufacturer. There was a huge reaction from the people there, but there was no solution for a long time. Sister Hong had been watching that place for several months. Chapter 50:18. Sumu nodded. When she got there, Sister Hong gave her a USB flash drive. This kind of project was confidential. Sumu took it and prepared to read it carefully at night. She had to buy a laptop to facilitate her work. So when she got off work, she saw Yi Xiangnan's car parked outside the newspaper office. She got in the car without any objection. Because it was too ostentatious, she asked him to drive the car away quickly. Yi Xiangnan pursed his lips and started the car. After driving for a while, she found that he was driving to the biggest shopping center. She couldn't help but say, I want to buy a laptop later. Buy a few more. What if it breaks? His words were inhumanly rich. Sumu glanced at him and didn't say anything else. Yi Xiangnan continued driving and suddenly said, Actually, we are no different from a real husband and wife. We sleep together, eat together, and go shopping together. Sumu, do you really hate me? She unexpectedly turned her head and stared at him. Yi Xiangnan smiled and let her stare. He didn't force her to say anything. He was always angry with her because she couldn't forget Shen Wenquan. Before getting out of the car, Sumu said softly, Not every relationship can be started whenever you want. There are many times when it's over. Yi Xiangnan stopped the car but didn't get out immediately. Instead, he tilted his head and looked at Sumu. When is the next opportunity? Can you tell me in advance? This was teasing and teasing. Sumu was so angry that she ignored him. She wanted to get out of the car, but he reached out and grabbed her hand. She turned her head. Yi Xiangnan stared at her. I'm serious. Think about it. Sumu bit her lip. After a long time, she said in a low voice, get out of the car first. He let go of her and got out of the car. Instead, he went to pick out 2 notebooks for her. One was silver, and the other was pink. Sumu was not very girlish, but CEO Yi said that Yi Hui was pink in many ways. He said that she would grow old after giving birth. His wife was only 23 years old. Sumu had never thought that Yi Xiangnan was like this in private. In fact, he didn't know he was like this. In the past, when he was with Yi Huan, although he was also arrogant, most of the time he gave in to Yi Huan and rarely teased her. It seemed that in his heart, Yi Huan was a pampered girl. He liked her, but her coquettishness and gentleness all belonged to Shinting. He and Qin Yi Huan seemed to have gone astray from the beginning. He and Sumu weren't like this. He didn't like her very much, but he liked to tease her. He was happy when he was with her, but sometimes he was very angry. It was the desire to conquer. He didn't know how long he could maintain his passion for her, but as long as she was a good wife, he would give her the life she wanted. When it came to women, they were just as so-so. There was nothing special about them. After choosing, Yi Xiangnan swiped his card. Sumu wanted to give him money, but he didn't accept it. He said impolitely, you'd better keep your money. I'm afraid that you won't be able to pay the rent in the future. Sumu, I don't want to lose face, however, what he said was true. Sumu didn't have much savings. Fortunately, Cymbidium Chinense was now in the Yi family, so she didn't have to spend a lot. Suddenly, she felt that she was very, very poor. 20 chapters. There will be another explosive chapter at the beginning of next month. Yes, more intense. Chapter 50-19. Yi Xiangnan looked at her and smiled. Didn't you just swipe your own card? The 2 notebooks were the most high-end ones, and they cost tens of thousands of yuan. Even if Sumu sold herself, it would not be enough. She still had some self-awareness. After buying the notebooks, Yi Xiangnan went to the parking lot and threw them into the car. The car door was locked. Sumu asked curiously, why is the car door locked? You still want to buy something? Yi Xiangnan looked at her and sighed. You're the granddaughter-in-law of the old master's birthday. Are you going to wear this? Sumu thought for a moment and said, I can still wear the clothes from that day. She was talking about the Chanel dress. Yi Xiangnan walked forward and said calmly, you can't wear the same clothes on a formal occasion. That was the rule of a rich family. Sumu felt sorry for him. That's such a waste. It was probably because they were talking about business that she let down her guard a little. She actually walked side by side with him naturally, and the distance between them wasn't too far. Yi Xiangnan turned his head and looked at her with a subtle expression. Before Sumu could react, her body was embraced by him. Hugging him by his side, it seemed very intimate. Firstly, Sumu was frightened, and secondly, she was really not used to it. She screamed out loud. Fortunately, there was no one in the parking lot, or she would have thought that she had met a pervert. Yi Xiangnan's hand slipped and he held her hand instead. You're happy again, aren't you? Sumu felt that he was really too boring. She bit her lip and said, Yi Xiangnan, you're the one who's happy. Your whole family is happy. He looked at her with a smile in his eyes. After a while, he said with a smile, my whole family is happy. You haven't seen my mother being happy every day. Sumu felt that she had nothing in common with him. She pursed her lips and stopped talking. Yi Xiangnan thought she was cute and reached out to touch her palm. What's wrong? Are you shy? This was also the first time for Night Lord Gongzi to talk about love. He and Qin Yi Huan grew up together, and everything seemed natural. They felt that they would be together in the future, so they weren't too intimate. However, he had a different feeling towards Su Mu. He probably felt that she was his now, so he could do whatever he wanted without considering anything else. This sense of belonging was pretty good for young Lord Nightfall. Su Mu felt that he was bored and wanted to pull her hand back, but he wouldn't let her. He gripped it tightly and curled his lips. How many women want me to treat them like this? You, on the other hand, are acting as though I'm sick. Su Mu's mouth didn't spare him either. With your lifestyle, it's not surprising that you got sick. What about you? Yi Xiangnan asked back with a smile that didn't seem like a smile. Su Mu was a little annoyed. I'm very clean and self-respecting. He looked at her and said word by word slowly, if I had it, you would have infected it long ago. Su Mu, her face was a little hot, and she didn't know if it was red. In any case, she could only cover her face and walk forward. Yi Xiangnan smiled and reached out to hold her. Why are you running? Su Mu was pulled back by him, but she couldn't move and could only stare at him. Or are you shy? He seemed to be in a good mood again. It was really the same as taking a bath and going down to the ground. Su Mu looked at him and asked the question in her heart, Yi Xiangnan, are you used to making do? For a rich man like him who was good-looking and busy, shouldn't he find a wife who was suitable for him? Chapter 50-20. He didn't like her at all. She really didn't know what he was holding on for. Yi Xiangnan glanced at her. If you don't want me to leave you here, you'd better shut up. Okay. Su Mu didn't want to piss him off either. But she suddenly thought, why did she want to go to the banquet with him? When she asked this, Yi Xiangnan's expression was a little funny. You're my wife. If you don't go, do you want me to bring Secretary Li? He didn't have a woman to bring to a private event. If he brought a secretary, would he be laughed at? Su Mu thought of Cymbidium Chinense. Cymbidium Chinense must be going too. In order to prevent others from criticizing Cymbidium Chinense, she thought that she should accompany Yi Xiangnan. She would just treat it as accompanying Cymbidium Chinense. She thought that just one set would be enough, but after Yi Xiannan took her to Chanel, they actually picked out more than 10 sets for her after looking around. And his taste was very good. He tried on a few sets and they were all very suitable. His temperament was even better. Yi Xiangnan also picked out some accessories for her. Necklaces and earrings were very suitable for Su Mu. The shopping guide couldn't help but exclaim, this lady is the most suitable for Chanel I've seen. Every piece is really exquisite. Wrap it all up, Yi Xiangnan said calmly. The shopping guide was very happy. It should be known that these were almost 1,000,000 yuan. Wrapping them all up, Yi Xiangnan filled in his address. Anyway, she would wear one set every time and wouldn't have to bring it back. This was his selfish motive. It could be considered a dark one. Unfortunately, people like Su Mu couldn't feel it. She thought that was it, but Yi Xiannan seemed to really want to go shopping. It was already early winter, so he brought her to a relatively affordable brand and picked out some daily wear. It wasn't very flamboyant, but it was much more dignified than what she was wearing. Su Mu's clothes were clean and tidy, but most of them were worth more than 100 yuan. And in this shopping center, even the cheapest item from the affordable brands would cost more than 1,000 yuan. Young Master Yi acted as if he didn't care about money. He picked up more than 10 items from each brand, adding up to more than 50 items. There were clothes, shoes, coats, and even down jackets for winter wear. He even helped her buy a sturdy suitcase. Go on a business trip with someone. Don't embarrass me, he said. At that time, Sumu stood there and listened to his poisonous words. She felt an indescribable feeling in her heart. She was a little absent-minded. She felt that she and Yi Xiangnan were getting too close and too fast. She was even a little afraid of the feeling of losing control. Sumu knew all too well that people like Yi Xiangnan had too much. He could get whatever he wanted. He had wealth, he had good looks, he had everything he wanted. If he wanted a woman's heart, he could use these things to get it, and he could get it faster than anyone else. And then, when he was tired of it, he threw it away. Then he would move on to the next round of the game. Sumu was very afraid that she would become his game. She didn't dare to be tempted. However, she was also clear that no woman could remain indifferent in the face of such love. She was the same. And she was a woman who had been poor for a long time. Sumu lamented how poor she was again. Yi Xiangnan asked the shopping guide to help him carry the things to the parking lot. The back seat was full, and the shopping guide looked at him with envy. Yi Xiangnan closed the car door. As he fastened the seatbelt, he said to Sumu, "You must be so happy. No man has ever doted on you like this, right?" Chapter 50-21. Memorized. Sumu turned her face away. Take it back. You don't mean what you say. He suddenly leaned over. Do you really not want me? Sumu, do you know how many women in B City want me to be their man? Sumu was startled and instinctively moved back. However, when she moved back, she realized that he had fastened his seatbelt and could not come over at all. Yi Xiangnan smiled evilly again. You're afraid of me. Of course, Sumu was stubborn. I'm not afraid of you. With a soft sound, his seatbelt was unbuckled. It was very dark in the car, and he seemed to be leaning over at any moment. Sumu suddenly held her head and screamed. Yi Xiangnan didn't move again. He chuckled and said, You're that scared of me? In fact, he had long discovered that Sumu was somewhat afraid of him. She was afraid of his approach. Perhaps it was because her memories of the past weren't too good. Thinking about it, it was still a little frustrating. She was not his only woman, but Sumu was his first woman. He was also Sumu's only man. For some reason, he cared a lot about it. If she had given birth to Cymbidium chinense and got together with Shen Wenxuan, he probably wouldn't be so insistent on marrying her. This was the nature of men. They could be unfaithful, but the woman they married had to be clean. Cleanliness was Sumu's greatest strength. He could feel it even without investigating. She only had him. Yi Xiangnan sat back down and fastened his seatbelt. He chuckled and said, I've never seen anyone as timid as you. Sumu calmed down and bit her lower lip, not wanting to talk to him. One of them was laughing while the other was angry. They looked like a couple. At this moment, Yi Xiangnan's gaze suddenly froze as he quietly looked in the direction in front of him. His expression was very focused, as if his surroundings did not exist, and as if he had forgotten that Sumu was by his side. Sumu followed his gaze and saw the car in front. The car door was open, and a tall and handsome man was helping a woman into the car. Sumu also knew the two of them. They were the newly married Shenting and Qin Yihuan. Qin Yihuan was pregnant, so Shenting was more considerate towards his wife. Sumu turned her head again. Just then, the car lights outside swept past Yi Xiangnan's face. There was a trace of pain and nostalgia on his face. Instantly, Sumu's heart turned cold. She clenched her fists tightly, and all the things that had been aroused earlier suddenly turned cold. He loved Qin Yi Huan. Other than Qin Yi Huan, he didn't care about other women. Su Mu just happened to have a child with him. How could she think that he doted on her? Actually, it was just a whim. She pursed her lips and smiled gently. She was laughing at herself for overestimating herself. In just a few seconds, the ripples in Su Mu's heart returned to a state of stagnant water. He always felt that she did not love him. Why should she love him? A man only treated her as a tool to give birth to a child. After marrying her, it would be best if he kept her at home as a nanny. When he was happy, he would coax her, buy her things, and give her endless money. Was such a man worthy of her love? Love was equal. It was a process of constantly giving and demanding. Su Mu felt that there was no love between her and Yi Xiangnan. That was the case now. Yi Xiangnan finally retracted his gaze because the car in front of him had driven away. But his emotions had not calmed down yet. Su Mu said softly, "Do you want me to drive?" "No need." His voice was indifferent, as if he was no longer in the mood to tease her. Chapter 50-22. Su Mu knew that everything was back to normal after seeing Qin Yi Huan. She could also understand why he wanted to drink on the day of Yi Huan's wedding and why he brought her to the villa. She was a little ashamed and angry. Even the things he bought in the car had become tools to humiliate her. He kept saying that she was his wife, but she was really nothing. On the way back, neither of them spoke, especially Yi Xiangnan, who had one hand on the window and the other on the steering wheel. The window was open. Su Mu was a little cold, but she didn't remind him. When she got out of the car, she sneezed twice. She had completely caught a cold. Yi Xiangnan got out of the car and looked at her. "Su Mu, are you an idiot? Didn't you tell me that the car was cold?" Su Mu smiled and didn't say anything. She only took a laptop and didn't take any other clothes. At this time, it was a little cheap for her to take them home. Under normal circumstances, a woman would accept something from a man because she liked him. She went upstairs and disappeared up the old stairs. Yi Xiangnan's mind finally cleared up and he punched the car. Just now, Su Mu looked like she was looking at a virus. Yes, he couldn't help himself when he saw Yi Huan. After all, they had been together for so many years. When Su Mu saw Shen Wenxuan, she also looked affectionate, but he didn't get angry at her. Looking at the car full of things, she decided not to take it. Just as he was thinking, there was another set of footsteps on the stairs. He looked up and saw that it was Su Mu coming down again. Yi Xiangnan looked at her. Su Mu had a card in her hand. She gently placed it in his palm. The password is Cymbidium Chinense birthday. I only have this much. It might be 2,000 or 3,000 yuan less. I will pay it back in the future. Yi Xiangnan looked at the card in his hand as if it was scalding hot. He frowned. Do you really have to calculate everything clearly with me? Su Mu pursed her lips. I just don't think I should accept your gift. Just as she finished speaking, her body was thrown onto the car at the side, and then his solid body came over to trap her. Su Mu, why are you so noble and virtuous? Do you think that you exchange Cymbidium Chinense in yourself for something you accept? Do you think that I'm high and mighty when you're with me? Do you use your identity to draw a line when you're unhappy? Yes, we don't have any emotional foundation, but I'm treating you seriously. Do you think it's interesting for you to fight with me just because of a small matter today? Or do you think that men will never be tired and will always put a woman's feelings first? Su Mu's bones were aching, but she didn't care at all. She just smiled. Mr. Yi, what you're doing now is high and mighty. That's also your doing, he said fiercely and glared at her. He didn't know what to do with her. He just felt that she was very hateful. He had told her that he was serious. He seriously wanted to treat her as his wife and treat her seriously. They had both liked someone else. He could give her time, but why couldn't she? Thinking of this, Yi Xiangnan's heart suddenly turned cold. He suddenly felt that it was meaningless. He was Yi Xiangnan, the president of Stars Entertainment. He was chasing after a woman who didn't like him and even hated him. They had a child, but she didn't want to give each other a chance at all. Chapter 50-23. Memorize. No matter what he did, no matter how well he did, as long as it wasn't what she wanted, she would completely deny it. Yi Xiangnan's voice turned cold, and the expression on his face seemed to indicate that he had made some sort of decision. He said quietly, "That's it." He put her card back in her hand and took a step back. "Miss Su, from now on, you're just the mother of Cymbidium Chinense. If you want a divorce certificate, I can give it to you tomorrow." He was really angry. After saying that, he saw that Su Mu was still leaning against the car, so he gently pulled her away. He looked at her deeply, then opened the car door and got into the car. The car drove away quickly, leaving Su Mu standing there alone. She knew that with Yi Xiangnan's temper, he wouldn't come back. She knew that in his eyes, she was spoiled and arrogant. But in Su Mu's heart, they were just two people who didn't love each other. There was no need for them to be tied together. Actually, what she didn't know was that she was just afraid of being hurt. She was afraid that if she gave her heart to a man like Yi Xiangnan, she wouldn't be able to take it back. She was afraid that he would get tired of it and trample on her heart wantonly. Standing in the night wind, Su Mu felt a little cold. She walked back slowly, knowing that they probably wouldn't have to meet again this time. Even if they did, it would be because of the Cymbidium Chinense. Yi Xiangnan was a little angry as he drove. He had only taken a few glances at Yi Huan. He had to admit that he had been absent-minded for a moment. What was Su Mu? Was there no tolerance between husband and wife? He was always trying to make her happy. Was he such a selfish man who only thought about himself? Su Mu was. She was a woman who only thought about her own pleasure and only cared about her own mood. He was simply trash. Scum. Noble young Master Yi thought somewhat angrily. He also felt that he cared too much about her. What did Su Mu have that he couldn't let go of? Yi Xiangnan thought about it and went to the bar to drink until late at night. But that night, there were women who came over to flirt with him, but he ignored them. His cold face scared away all the women who came over. Yi Xiangnan drank a little too much, but he still drove to Su Mu's building. He didn't go upstairs. He just stood in the night wind, as if forcing himself to stay awake. When he sobered up, he told himself that it was just a woman. Moreover, she was an extremely stubborn woman who would throw a tantrum at him for no reason. It would be very tiring to be with such a woman. Why should he? Yi Xiangnan leaned against the car, lit a cigarette, and smoked slowly. Just like that, he stayed there until dawn. Su Mu didn't sleep well either. After she woke up, she dumped the garbage from the day before. When she went downstairs, she saw Yi Xiangnan. Had he been standing all night? His coat was probably thrown in the car, and he was only wearing a black shirt. When she got closer, he smelled of alcohol. Yi Xiangnan stared at her and said calmly, "I've also thought about it. We really aren't suitable for each other. There's no need for us to be together. Su Mu, you can be with whoever you want in the future, even if it's Shen Wenxuan. I won't wait on you anymore." After saying that, he opened the car door and got into the car. The car sped away. Sumu lowered her eyes, and there was a trace of tears in them. Her throat was also a little itchy. She didn't say anything, but slowly dumped the garbage. Later, she didn't go to Yi Xingong's birthday party. It wasn't Secretary Li who went, but Lin Lu. It was Yi Hui who called and said that Lin Lu had been transferred back. Sumu didn't know if Yi Xiangnan and Lin Lu were together again. The only thing she could be sure of was that he was doing it for her to see, to put her in her place. Chapter 50-24. Memorize. She thanked Yi Hui on the phone and said that they would not be together. The matter of Yi Xiangnan transferring Lin Lu back was known by everyone in Starlight. Shen Wenxuan naturally knew that. Now, he really couldn't leave even if he wanted to. Lawyer Chen had been in a car accident and couldn't walk anymore. He wouldn't be able to recover for at least a year or two. Moreover, he was getting old. Even if he could leave in the future, he probably wouldn't want to work so hard anymore. Shen Wenxuan couldn't leave for the time being, so he took over Lawyer Chen's work. He actually had a lot of contact with Yi Xiangnan. On this day, Shen Wenxuan finished his work and was about to leave when Yi Xiangnan stopped him. "Boss Yi, is there anything else?" Shen Wenxuan said in a businesslike manner. Yi Xiangnan put down the golden pen in his hand. "Do something for me." Shen Wenxuan waited for him to speak. He had a hunch that it was about Sumu. Yi Xiangnan had openly brought Lin Lu to the family banquet. This matter was probably known by everyone in Starlight, and Sumu should also know about it. Shen Wenxian was angry in his heart, but Yi Xiangnan was his boss, so he could only hide his emotions in the company. Yi Xiangnan looked at him and said, "Help me contact Miss Su to handle the divorce. You don't have to prepare any special agreements. She's very virtuous and won't take a single cent from me. I'm not going to give her a single cent either." The last sentence was very personal and also very infuriating. "After I divorce Miss Su, I won't interfere in her private affairs. Lawyer Shen, do as you see fit." Shen Wenxuan clenched his fists. "Sumu is not an object. You can divorce her, but you have no right to decide other things about her." He suddenly understood why Sumu and Yi Xiangnan could not be together. It was because they were not equal. In Yi Xiangnan's heart, she was always a woman who could come and go at his beck and call. He did not respect her at all. Shen Wenxuan could choose not to be with Sumu, but he could not tolerate others insulting her. Especially when Yi Xiangnan clearly had her, but he still talked about her in such an arrogant tone. Lawyer Shen couldn't take it anymore and punched at CEO Yi. The two men fought for Sumu in the CEO's office of Stars Entertainment. They fought so fiercely that everyone knew about it. In the end, even Sumu came over. It was Yi Hui who called. The scene in the Starlight was somewhat ugly. Both men were injured, and their faces were unsightly. At this time, Lin Lu wanted to show off, but Secretary Li skillfully blocked her out. What a joke. The president had gotten into a fight because of Sumu. It was obvious that he couldn't forget her, but he couldn't bring himself to do it. Instead, he had beaten up her ex-boyfriend. What kind of trick was this? What kind of brain circuit was this? In any case, Secretary Li couldn't understand what was going on. He just felt that this EQ was even lower than that of a child. The doctor in the company was examining the two men's injuries. Fortunately, it was not to the extent of breaking the tendons and bones. It was just a superficial injury. Sumu received Yi Hui's call and roughly guessed the reason why Shen Wenxuan had hit her. So she went. After Secretary Li opened the door for her, she walked in. They hadn't seen each other for many days. Yi Xiangnan found that she had lost some weight. He frowned. Su Mu and Sister Hong had gone on a business trip and had only returned this morning. As soon as they came back, they rushed here and saw the scene. She walked to Shen Wenxuan and sighed softly. In the future, don't do this. Yi Xiangnan's face was not good, and Secretary Li was about to cry. Miss Su, you should comfort the president. Don't only care about your ex-boyfriend. If you leave, the whole company will be finished. Chapter 50-25. For example, Lin Lu. Although she went to the family dinner and was transferred back to the company, she thought that her good days were coming. Bah, she was the unluckiest. Most of CEO Ye's anger was on her. Secretary Li had every reason to believe that if it weren't for the tiny hope, Lin Lu would have quit a long time ago. At the same time, she also admired Lin Lu. She could really bear it. Several times during the meeting, Lin Lu was about to cry, but she forcibly held back her tears. But she admired Su Mu more. Although CEO Yi was angry with her, it was Lin Lu who was scolded and Lawyer Shen who was beaten. Looking at how badly Lawyer Shen's handsome little face was hurt, it really made one's heart ache. Secretary Li said at an inappropriate time. As soon as she looked up, she saw her boss's dark face. She immediately restrained her thoughts. She shouldn't feel distressed for Lawyer Shen at this time, she should feel distressed for CEO Yi. After Su Mu finished talking to Shen Wenxuan, she turned her head and looked at Yi Xiangnan. Isn't it just to sign the divorce certificate? I'll sign it. Besides, I won't take a dime from you. Don't make things difficult for others. Yi Xiangnan said sourly, do you feel distressed? Secretary Li couldn't listen to it anymore. Was this CEO Yi? Yi Hui was also there. She looked at Secretary Li and felt ashamed for her brother. He clearly cared about her, but he was stubborn and wanted to sign the divorce certificate. How long did it take to cheat her last time? She wanted to divorce after a few days. It was like she was running a house. Even a child wouldn't be so fast to get tired of the old. After Yi Xiangnan finished speaking, he thought that Su Mu wouldn't dare to talk back in front of others. After all, she was a married woman. But he really underestimated Su Mu. She actually replied very bluntly, yes, I feel distressed. What do you think? Yi Xiangnan's face was so ugly that he could strangle her on the spot. He almost squeezed a few words out of his teeth. Really? That's good. You can go anywhere and with whoever you want after signing it. Shen Wenxuan almost pounced on her again, but Su Mu stood in front of him and said calmly, you don't have to do this. Just sign it. As she spoke, she stared at Yi Xiangnan. They had not seen each other for almost 10 days, and she had long thought that he would ask her to sign this. In fact, from the moment he brought Lin Lu to the family banquet, she had already given up on him. He was clearly trying to slap her in the face. If Su Mu didn't sign, it would be too cheap. She looked at Yi Xiangnan calmly, then turned to Shen Wenxuan and said, Lawyer Shen, sorry to trouble you. After she finished speaking, Yi Hui said in a low voice, Sister-in-law, think about it carefully. Su Mu shook her head and said nothing. After a few times of fooling around, how could she and Yi Xiangnan be together? Shen Wenxuan went to his office and asked his secretary to prepare some documents. When he came back, he put them on the table. Su Mu signed her name without thinking and pushed it to Yi Xiangnan. Yi Xiangnan looked at her signature and narrowed his eyes slightly. She was not sloppy at all. There was nothing wrong with it. He said that he would set her free. Of course, she couldn't wait to be with a certain man. After signing it, no one could stop them in the future. So, he also signed. Lawyer Shin, go and do it. When you're done, tell Miss Shin to come and pick it up. His tone was particularly cold. Su Mu pursed her lips and didn't care. Anyway, they had already agreed that this certificate was for Cymbidium Chinense to go to school. Chapter 50-26. It was nothing to sign the papers and leave now. They, too, had never started. But Shin Wenchuan refused. He said lightly, CEO Yi, you should ask someone else to do it. I'm not the right person. Yi Xiangnan narrowed his eyes and threw the documents to Secretary Li. Let other secretaries do it. Secretary Li said yes, but it was a little difficult to take it out. This thing was like a hot potato. No one knew how to deal with it. Divorce CEO Yi. Are you kidding me? Who dared to do it? The marriage certificate was something that CEO Yi had spent a lot of effort to swindle. How could he say that he didn't want it? Anyway, Secretary Li didn't believe it. She went out and thought about it again and again. Finally, she decided to put it down first. Maybe CEO Yi would regret it later. He often did this kind of thing. Before he met Miss Su, Boss Yi was an elegant gentleman. After he met Miss Su, he became an intermittent mental patient. A patient needed to be comforted. Secretary Li went out for a while and came back, but the person in question had left. Only CEO Yi and Miss Yi Hui were there. Secretary Li went in. Yi Xiangnan looked at her. Is it done? Secretary Li nodded vaguely. Yes, CEO Yi. Yi Xiangnan's voice was faint. That's it. You go out first. Before Secretary Li left, she exchanged a look with Yi Hui. Unexpectedly, CEO Yi accidentally saw it and threw a pillow at her. Why are you still here? Secretary Li was amused. CEO Yi was so angry that he turned into a little princess. When she went out, Yi Hui made an excuse to come out. They were together. Shen Wenchuan left and my sister-in-law followed him. She said she would take him to the hospital. Yi Hui sighed. Well, sister-in-law used to avoid it. Now that my brother said he wanted a divorce, it's just right. It's so convenient for an unmarried man and an unmarried woman. Secretary Li smiled and echoed, if not for that. If not, CEO Yi must be sulking there now. Yi Hui smiled and said, my brother is so stubborn. He obviously can't bear to do it. It's just a small matter and he can just make a fuss and coax him a little. Why does he have to act like a young master? Secretary Li smiled. Miss Su doesn't fall for his tricks. Not only do they not eat it, they hate it to the core. Yi Hui sighed. By the way, you didn't really hand the document over to the legal team, did you? Once you sign it, it'll be hard to go back. Secretary Li revealed a mysterious smile, and Yi Hui understood. She was quite impressed by Secretary Li. You're practically a god. You're like a roundworm in my brother's stomach. Secretary Li chuckled and said, as a secretary, I have to have this little bit of foresight. Yi Hui still wanted to talk to her, but thinking that she had been out for a long time, she was afraid that Yi Xiangnan would be suspicious, so she went back. There was no one else in the spacious office. Yi Xiangnan was lying on the sofa, his face unsightly. Yi Hui went over and sat beside him. She touched the corner of his mouth with her finger and whispered, Brother, why don't I take you to the hospital? Maybe you can meet sister-in-law by chance. Sister-in-law? Yi Xiangnan said coldly, she's not your sister-in-law. Now she's out with a wild man. Am I her husband? You've already given birth to a child. How can you not be? Yi Hui was particularly good-tempered. She held his hand and said, "Are you really willing to give sister-in-law to someone else? She and Shen Wenshuan are first love. What if they can't control themselves?" Chapter 50-27. Memorize. She can go wherever she wants. Yi Xiangnan's temper was rising. This kind of provocation didn't work. At this moment, Yi Hui was a little uncertain. Did her big brother really give up? She leaned against her brother and looked at him without saying a word. After all, Yi Xiangnan loved his sister dearly. He reached out and touched her little face. "What's wrong?" Yi Hui leaned her face against his chest. When they were young, they were close like this. Yi Hui whispered, "Brother, I'm afraid that you won't find someone you like in the future." Yi Xiangnan was a very picky person. Ever since he was young, he had never liked anyone except Qin Yihuan. He didn't care about those women at all. But she felt that Su Mu was different. She was different from Sister Yihuan. Yi Hui couldn't tell what was different. She just felt that her brother might regret giving up. Feeling her emotions, Yi Xiangnan's heart softened. This silly sister couldn't even take care of herself. She was worried about him. He lay down and looked at the ceiling. "Yi Hui, I think Su Mu and I are really not suitable for each other. She's too competitive. There are so many gentle and lovely women. Why don't you like any of them?" Yi Hui propped herself up and looked at him. Yi Xiangnan didn't want to talk to his sister anymore. Just thinking about Su Mu and Shen Wenshuan kissing each other in the hospital made his teeth hurt. Okay, let me sleep for a while." He closed his eyes and patted Yi Hui's little head. "And don't tell Mom and Dad about my fight." Yi Hui stared at him and didn't say anything in the end. In the hospital, Shen Wenshuan found that he had a slight fracture in his hand. After it was treated, he said that he wanted to treat Su Mu to dinner. Su Mu didn't refuse. They were like old friends. Whether Su Mu got a divorce or not would not affect their relationship. He also had a girlfriend, and their relationship was neither good nor bad. If Shen Wenshuan didn't take the initiative, he would probably end up dead. As he walked, he came to the vicinity of his former school. Both sides of the long street were lined with French plane trees. The leaves had long fallen in the early winter weather. There were also some fallen leaves piled up on the ground by the roadside, making a rustling sound when stepped on. "I wonder if that restaurant is still there." Then, he turned to look at Su Mu. There was a smile and nostalgia on his face. Su Mu also smiled. "Shall we go and take a look?" After walking for about 5 minutes, they arrived at the seafood restaurant. Business was as good as before. At 8:00 in the evening, all the seats were full. The proprietress was still the same as before. She had an amazing memory. As soon as she saw Su Mu and Shen Wenshuan come in, she wiped her apron and came over to greet them. "It's been so many years. You're still together." Chapter 50-28. Shen Wenshuan stopped her. "She can't drink." The lady boss had an understanding look on her face. "My heart aches for my wife, I understand." Shen Wenshuan didn't explain, and Su Mu didn't say anything either. This place was the same as before, and they were the same as before. It was good to be old friends even if they couldn't be husband and wife. It was cold, so she ordered a pot of lamb scorpion. It was slightly spicy, and she was sweating after eating it, but it was very satisfying. "The signboard here." The lady boss was very interested in their table, so she took the initiative to say, "Miss Su, you haven't been here for many years. This dish is delicious. Mr. Shen has ordered it every year since he graduated. It's cold today, so it's the best time to listen to it. The atmosphere is also lively. Sumu smiled. It tasted good, but it was a little spicy. After a while, she was sweating all over. Sumu looked at Shen Wenshuan and smiled. You don't eat spicy food, do you? Shen Wenshuan said softly, don't you like it? Sumu didn't say anything and continued to eat the hot pot. After eating, it was almost 10 o'clock. Shen Wenshuan couldn't drive because his hand was injured, and he had drunk beer. In the end, Sumu sent him to his apartment, and then she took a taxi back. When she was about to get in the car, Shen Wenshuan stopped her. Sumu turned her head. Sumu, go to school when you have time, he said softly. Sumu smiled. When I have time. However, they both knew that it was impossible. Their memories belonged to school. Even without Yi Xiangnan, it was unlikely that they would be together. Sumu was a married and divorced woman, and she had a child. Unless Shen Wenshuan broke up with his family, it was impossible for him to be with Sumu. He was willing, but it would be unfair to Sumu. He didn't want it to be like this. Shen Wenshuan wanted to take care of her, but he swallowed the words. She was proud, and he had no position. Today, they could only be old friends. Sumu still got into the car. As the car drove away, she looked out the window and bit her fingernails. The driver in front smiled. Young lady, is that your boyfriend? He's very handsome, and he lives in a good house. He must be rich, right? Just an old classmate, Sumu murmured. The driver probably knew something and didn't say anything. The car stopped downstairs. Sumu paid the driver and was about to go upstairs. A flashy car was parked there, and Yi Xiangnan was leaning against the car door. Sumu pretended not to see anything and walked upstairs. Yi Xiangnan's voice was strange. You just signed the contract and you can't wait to go on a date. Don't forget that Shen Wenshuan still has a girlfriend. Sumu felt that he was boring. CEO Yi, if you have nothing to do, you can find some models to drink with. It's better than staying here. That's true. He actually nodded. What am I here for? To catch adultery. She's not my wife. As he spoke, he opened the car door, got into the car and drove away. Sumu felt that he was crazy, so she ignored him and went home. She went back to open the door and was stunned. All the things he had bought for her were piled up here. Sumu called Yi Xiangnan and said stiffly, "Why do you have the keys to my house?" That's not the point. His voice was even colder than hers. The point is that these are gifts from me. If you don't like them, you can just throw them away. Don't ask me again. Sumu bit her lips. Thank you, Mr. Yi. Of course, she didn't want these things. In the end, she just packed them up and piled them in the corner. Chapter 50-29. Sumu was a little tired. She had been busy all day. Later, she and Yi Xiangnan didn't seem to have any contact. Even when she went to one garden, she rarely met him. Even when they met, he pretended not to see her and brushed past her. Every time, the atmosphere was very strange. When Yuan couldn't do anything about the two children. She sighed and felt that the two children were not destined to be together. Yi Mubai didn't say anything and just looked at his magazine. When Yuan took the magazine in his hand and bit his lip. Say it. The two children were fine before, but now they are fighting like this. I heard from Yi Hui that the divorce agreement has been signed. If it wasn't for Secretary Lee, our daughter-in-law would have flown away. Hasn't she flown away yet? Yi Mubai looked at his wife and looked helpless. Why are you in such a hurry? You don't even want your son to let her go. Su Mu is fine. It's bad luck to be entangled by him. These words made Wen Yuan feel uncomfortable. She didn't love her son at all. But when he thought about it carefully, there was indeed nothing wrong with it. Yi Mubai patted his wife's hand and said, "Let him torment himself. If you ask me, it's his own doing. Think about it, isn't it normal for young couples to quarrel? It's the old master's birthday. Even if he brought a secretary, it would be better than bringing Lin Lu." Cymbidium Chinense was so wrong that she cried, not to mention Su Mu. Xiangnan is so overbearing. It's not like the girl can't get married. Yi Mubai said something fair. If it wasn't for Cymbidium Chinense, Su Mu wouldn't have been willing to come to our house. Wen Yuan let out a long sigh. Later, she thought of talking to Wen Yuan and trying to untie the knot in their hearts. She even arranged for them to have dinner at home. But the two of them didn't see each other. After dinner, one went to the company, and the other said that he wanted to interview. After a long time, Wen Yuan lost confidence and told Yi Mubai to let them be. She really couldn't do anything about it. Just like that, a month passed. One day, Su Mu suddenly remembered that the divorce certificate hadn't been completed. She didn't want to call Yi Xiannan, so she thought about it and called Secretary Li. Secretary Li was a smart person. CEO Yi didn't ask about this matter for a month. Obviously, he didn't really want a divorce. He just wanted Miss Su to take the initiative to ask for peace. Rich men were always so troublesome. Secretary Li thought for a moment and immediately came up with an idea. "Miss Su, it's already done. I was too busy and forgot. Why don't you come to Starlight Entertainment and get it?" Su Mu was also a person who was very afraid of troubling others. Hearing her words, she arranged it at 2:00 the next afternoon. As soon as Secretary Li hung up the phone, he immediately arranged for a fake certificate. This matter was not difficult, but if Miss Su were to marry someone one day, it would be a big deal. Of course, she made the decision on her own. CEO Yi was angry, so she didn't go and touch this bad luck. With Secretary Li's help, the matter was quickly settled. 2,000 yuan, a fresh green book was placed in her drawer, waiting for Su Mu to come and get it. At the Sun News Agency, there was a rumor that Su Mu and CEO Yi were going to divorce. This was really unexpected news. Weren't they very loving a while ago? Were they going to divorce all of a sudden? Dreamy was overjoyed. Intentionally or unintentionally, she kept mentioning Yi Xiangnan's affair. The pantry became a place for them to gossip after a meal. After Su Mu came to the news agency, Dreamy's #1 imaginary enemy changed from Sister Hong to Su Mu. Chapter 50-30. Updated quickly, after Su Mu came to the newspaper office, Dreamy's #1 imaginary enemy changed from Sister Hong to Su Mu. Because Su Mu has everything that a woman dreams of. Dreamy has been practicing for so long just to find a rich man to marry. She has a good face and a good figure, and she graduated from a famous university. She hasn't found a decent man for many years. She is almost 30, but she still hangs around with an ugly man like Zhang Fucai. Su Mu is good. She doesn't have a good figure or a good face, and she has found such an excellent man. How can people not hate her? Fortunately, they are going to divorce. Dreamy is very happy. Have you heard that her husband brought a former mistress to the family dinner? That's why they quarreled with each other. Dreamy's voice is full of schadenfreude, a woman can't be too strong. A man like Mr. Yi can be seen at a glance. You know, it's not a big deal to have a few women outside. Why should she be so angry? Even if she is angry to death, no one will care. Men can still have fun outside. If she is angry, she will divorce you. She is talking excitedly, and Sister Hong comes to pour water. Hearing these remarks, she says coldly, "Du Meili, you are shameless, but others do. Are you addicted to being a mistress? Don't lead the other colleagues astray. Their worldview is not right." Du Meili flips her hair, loser. After that, she leaves in a flirtatious way. Xiaowen comes over and says, "Sister Hong, don't be angry with her. She is like this. She says the grapes are sour because she can't eat them. I heard that Boss Yi didn't even look at her that night. She feels uncomfortable, so she takes it out on Su Mu. Now she dares to say it when she heard that Su Mu is going to divorce. If it were before, she wouldn't dare to say anything." Sister Hong looks at her. "Xiaowen, you are good at psychology. Will you change your name and go out with me?" Xiaowen quickly shakes her hand. "I can't. Su Mu is better, isn't she, Sister Hong?" Xiaowen is simple. Although she is not promising, she is simple. Usually, Sister Hong treats her well, but she gives up treatment. Sister Hong glanced at her and then sighed softly. Su Mu is indeed quite capable. The press release this time is well written, and the public's reaction is also good. You guys should learn from him. Don't gossip all the time. You should focus on business. How many times have I said this? Du Meili snorts from a distance. "Do you really think you are the editor-in-chief? Magazine is not the same as our entertainment section." Xiaowen laughs. "The magazine is the positive energy of society." Du Meili glared fiercely at Xiaowen and twisted her body to do something else. Sister Hong, Wen eyes, Sister Hong, Su Mu eyes, Xiaowen eyes, Mu, I do, eyes. Sister Mu Tu Mu has I, is two, is Ning, one is everything. One Su Mu, one Mu, in, two, one, Su Mu nods and follows her in. Sister Hong pays attention to her image outside, but when she is in her own office, she lets go. She lights a cigarette, takes a puff, and looks at Su Mu. "What's going on? You divorced her just like that? Aren't you going to consider it?" Su Mu sits beside her. She wants to smoke a cigarette, but Sister Hong stops her. "Don't develop a bad habit. It's not appropriate for a woman to smoke." Su Mu Tu Mu is speechless. Isn't Sister Hong smoking too? Sister Hong snatches the cigarette from her hand, lights it, and takes a puff. "Am I still a woman? A woman like her can't be considered a woman anymore. She is divorced and has no children." Chapter 50-31. When she was with Zhang Fucai, she had a child, but she didn't want it because she couldn't afford it. At that time, she lost the qualification to be a mother forever. But that bastard used this as an excuse to spend money outside. She was so angry that she got a divorce. It was good to be divorced. She had freedom. She didn't have to look at that stinky man's face, and she didn't have to serve her in-laws endlessly. Sister Hong thought it was good. Anyway, she liked this kind of life. Business trips were just a matter of packing her luggage. But Su Mu was different. She had a son. Yi Xiangnan was handsome and had a high status. He was different from that old bastard Zhang Fucai, so Sister Hong had to persuade him. Besides, she had some friendship with Wen Yuan. She didn't mention this matter in the newspaper office. It could be considered as a kind of protection for Su Mu. After Sister Hong finished speaking, Su Mu was a little sad. She wasn't a gossipy person, but she heard some things from Xiaowen. She didn't expect that Sister Hong and Editor-in-Chief Zhang had such a past. Plus, with Du Meili, it was simply an ethical drama. What she couldn't accept the most was that the three of them were colleagues. How could Sister Hong stand seeing them like that every day? But Su Mu admired Sister Hong. She and Editor-in-Chief Zhang were businesslike and didn't complain at all. Sister Hong seemed to see through her thoughts and smiled gently. Zhang Fucai is already bald. Is there anything I can't let go of? There are so many young men out there. Why should I hang on him? Isn't that right, Su Mu? Su Mu didn't know if Sister Hong had loved that person. She thought she must have loved him. Otherwise, Sister Hong wouldn't have become the Sister Hong she was today. Sister Hong finished a cigarette and patted her on the shoulder. Let's put it this way. Think about it again. I'm going out to run a news report tonight. Come with me. Su Mu said yes. When she walked out, she saw Du Meili leaning against the door of the office. Du Meili's eyes were gloomy. Did that old witch say something bad about me? Su Mu's voice was indifferent. Senior Du, in the future, it's better to leave some leeway. Du Meili was so angry that her face changed. Su Mu, how dare you scold me? Do you think you are Mrs. Yi? President Yi doesn't want you anymore. Why are you still so arrogant here? Without the old witch to protect you, do you think you can stay in the newspaper office? Stop dreaming, I've already kicked you out. Su Mu didn't want to talk to her. Sister Hong was right. She was a lunatic. He had a good hand of cards, but he had to play them badly. As the two of them spoke, the chief editor came over. The chief editor was having a headache. Du Meili was getting more and more reckless. She had offended everyone because of her relationship with him. Even if Su Mu was divorced, she was still the mother of the heir of Stars Entertainment. She, Du Meili, was nothing. God knows what he's thinking. His mind is filled with nothing but Papa. Besides, she was too reckless. She called him in the middle of the night, making his new wife quarrel with him every day. At this time, he would think of Lu Hong. He remembered that they were in the early stage of the business. It was hard, but she was very considerate. She wasn't like a tomboy now. At that time, she was still quite beautiful. It was his fault that he lost her. In this lifetime, Sister Hong had always been a cinnabar in Zhang Fucai's heart. Du Meili was just a woman he had played with before. It was just that Du Meili didn't understand men very well. She thought that her beauty would be able to control Zhang Fucai completely. But after so many years, Zhang Fucai was already tired of her. Chapter 50-32. Although he was tired of it, it wasn't a loss for a man like him to find a woman like Du Meili. Anyway, that was the case. The chief editor felt that he couldn't afford to offend either of them, so he tried to smooth things over. Stop arguing. Don't bring personal matters to the company in the future. Xiao Du, come to my office. Du Meili twisted her body and gave Su Mu a smug smile. Su Mu didn't say anything and returned to her seat. Xiaowen whispered, "Silly Su Mu, you can't get a divorce no matter what. You know, it's easy to get out, but it's hard to get back in. So many people are eyeing that position." For example, she was very envious. Just CEO Ye's looks were enough to make people drool. He was rich, good-looking, and had a good figure. He was a top-grade man. Did Su Mu just say that she didn't want him? That was too capricious. Xiaowen felt that it was really a waste. This man was different from an object. He wasn't an object. He could be transferred even if she said she didn't want him. Sumu did her own things and said softly, I don't want to go back either. Xiaowen swallowed hard. Sumu, I think you have a special character. Really, you have a special character. Sumu smiled. I just don't want to feel wronged. The only one who would feel wronged after breaking up with Yi Xiangnan was Cymbidium Chinense. No one told Cymbidium Chinense about this, afraid that he would take things too hard and be angry or sad. Thinking of this, Sumu still felt a little annoyed. Actually, she didn't know how she fell out with Yi Xiangnan. Was it because he looked at Qin Yi Huan for a few seconds? Was it because he couldn't forget Qin Yi Huan? She rejected this possibility and didn't want to think too much about it. In the editor-in-chief's office, there was no one around. Zhang Fucai gave Du Meili a good scolding, telling her that Sumu had someone above her. If she didn't want to drag him down with her, she should keep her mouth shut. Du Meili would often throw a tantrum, and Zhang Fucai would coax her. Over time, it would become a good thing. Sister Hong was here to deliver the documents. The moment she pushed open the door, she saw the terrible state inside. Du Meili hugged old Zhang's neck and looked at Sister Hong provocatively. Sister Hong didn't close the door. She walked straight in and placed the things on the table. She paused for a moment and said, Zhang Fucai, you're already so old. Take it easy. You're not young anymore. Your wife and children are counting on you to support them. Zhang Fucai had always felt guilty toward Sister Hong, so his pig-like face turned red. Du Meili tugged at him. What are you afraid of? Don't you have the final say here? Zhang Fucai broke away from her and patted his clothes. Your Sister Hong is right. You need to take care of yourself when you're old. He chuckled. Sister Hong coldly snorted, Who's Sister Hong? Chapter 50-33. Zhang Fucai wasn't interested in this woman anymore, and he didn't care much about his family either. In fact, what he couldn't let go of was his ex-wife. His ex-wife was amazing. She looked like a tomboy, but Zhang Fucai was willing to die for her when she smoked and wore a skirt when she went out to socialize. Why didn't he see it before? Sister Hong walked out, and Sumu came over to ask for leave. Sister Hong probably guessed that it had something to do with Yi Xiangnan, so she patted her on the shoulder and said, Go ahead. Call me if you need anything. Sumu was very grateful to Sister Hong, so she nodded and left the newspaper office. She had to go to Starlight Entertainment to get the divorce certificate. They had never been husband and wife, so they were already divorced. When she arrived at the headquarters of Starlight Entertainment, Secretary Li was already waiting there because they had made an appointment in advance. Seeing Sumu coming, Secretary Li immediately ran over. Miss Su, I'm sorry to ask you to come here in person. Sumu smiled and said that it was okay. Secretary Li was very cautious. He brought Sumu to the meeting room and made her tea and snacks, but he didn't take out the certificate. Sumu was a little anxious. After waiting for half an hour, she finally said, Secretary Li, I'm here to get the certificate. Secretary Li seemed to have just remembered it. He smiled and said, Of course not. Saying that, he went back to take a file and gave it to Sumu. Sumu opened it and there was a green book inside. When she looked at it, she felt as if her throat was choked. She couldn't tell what she was feeling. At this moment, Yi Xiangnan came to the small meeting room for a meeting, followed by a group of senior executives, about 7 or 8 of them. As soon as the door was opened, everyone was stunned, including Yi Xiangnan. Secretary Li was startled and immediately stood up, Boss Yi, the meeting has begun. Miss Su, come and get something. Yi Xiangnan's eyes fell on Su Mu's hand, and then he raised his hand to signal the senior executives behind him to wait outside. The higher-ups were also perceptive. Seeing that CEO Yi had to deal with his family matters, how would they dare to stay there? After they left, Secretary Li also wanted to leave. Yi Xiangnan stopped her. Secretary Li, wait a moment. Secretary Li let out an awe. It was as if he was in a dream. Yi Xiangnan walked over and took the book from Su Mu's hand. He held it up high. Why don't I have this? He was shocked to see Su Mu, but he knew why she was here. Was there nothing else in her heart other than divorcing him? She usually avoided him whenever she saw him. He thought that she had thought it through, but it turned out that she was here for this. He questioned Secretary Li. Secretary Li's heart was trembling, but he firmly believed that he had done nothing wrong. He coughed and squinted his eyes. Boss Yi, I have already done it, but I forgot. Really? Yi Xiangnan's face didn't look good. Then he returned the book to Su Mu. Put it away. Don't lose it. You need it to be with your lover. Secretary Li was stunned. When did CEO Yi say such rude words? The atmosphere was a little strange. Su Mu was not easy to get along with. She put the book away directly and said, "Thank you, CEO Yi. I will." You'd better, or you will waste your kindness. Yi Xiangnan pointed out something and then looked at Secretary Li. Secretary Li's smile was very unnatural. She was also afraid that CEO Yi would say it. Chapter 50-34. Secretary Li smiled awkwardly. She was also afraid that CEO Yi would say it. Then she would lose face in front of Su Mu. If CEO Yi didn't say it, he would take the blame. Even if they fought in the future, CEO Yi would take the blame. Yi Xiangnan didn't say it out. Instead, he said calmly, "I've taken it. We're even." He looked at Secretary Li. "See them out." Secretary Li said, "Oh," and sent them out. Yi Xiangnan was having a meeting with the senior executives. He didn't seem to be affected at all. The senior executives also thought that CEO Yi had probably gotten over it. It was good. He didn't have to vent his anger on them when he was in a bad mood every day. As his subordinates, of course, they didn't dare to say anything. But they were too optimistic. CEO Yi would never let his subordinates have an easy time. If he had gotten over it, he wouldn't have asked Secretary Li to give a fake certificate to Su Mu. After Yi Xiangnan's meeting, the middle and senior executives all looked as if they had been hit by frost. They couldn't even lift their heads. When they walked out, they looked even worse. Secretary Li was also very sorry. But it was better than a divorce. If it was a divorce, CEO Yi wouldn't just be put in a difficult position. All the employees of Stars Entertainment wouldn't have a good life. It wasn't the first time that this happened. It was easy to imagine how chaotic it would be. Secretary Li smiled apologetically and then followed him out. When they arrived at CEO Ye's office, Yi Xiangnan turned sideways and looked at his secretary. After a while, he said calmly, "You've become bold. You even faked it in front of me." Secretary Li said as if she was reciting a book, "CEO Yi, the lawyer of the legal team hasn't gotten off work yet. If you want the green book, you can get it after work." Yi Xiangnan stared at her. "It hasn't been done yet." "Yes, I didn't go." Secretary Li muttered in his heart, "I just guessed it. It's okay to delay it. Miss Su is not a person who won't leave. But I was afraid that you would be lazy and refuse to let Miss Su go." When she said that, Yi Xiangnan threw a stack of documents on the ground. Secretary Li picked it up good-naturedly as he thought to himself, he really doesn't mean what he says. Your temper is really bad. No wonder Miss Sue doesn't want to be with you. It stinks. If it wasn't for the high salary, she wouldn't want to serve such a proud man. Secretary Li packed up the things and smiled again. I'm afraid that you will regret it. Regret what? Yi Xiangnan glanced at her and then said, by the way, what did she say? Secretary Li was amused in her heart and coughed lightly. She didn't say anything. She just stared blankly for a while. It seems that Miss Sue is also reluctant to part with CEO Yi. But CEO Yi seems to be too heartless. Girls are always embarrassed to ask for peace when they are kicked out. If it were someone else, they would have hugged CEO Yi's thigh. But Miss Sue is so unyielding. I don't think she will be like this. So CEO Yi, why don't you take the initiative? Maybe you can make up after treating her to dinner and sending her flowers. Think about it. CEO Yi's birthday is coming soon. It's so cold. Or, how about celebrating Lin Lu's birthday with him? Speaking of Lin Lu, it was hard to imagine how miserable she was. Originally, when CEO Yi brought her to the family banquet, she thought that CEO Yi had really taken a liking to her. That day, she was even prepared to not go home. Inside the gown was a very sexy black tight suit. Chapter 50-35. But that night, CEO Yi took her there and threw her to the table of distant relatives. He sat on the chair and got drunk. In the end, he was taken back by Wen Yuan. When Lin Lu went home, no one made arrangements for her. She was also very embarrassed. From that day on, she probably gave up and hid far away from CEO Yi. After Secretary Li finished speaking, Yi Xiangnan snorted coldly. Did I say that I wanted to make up with her? Secretary Li made a long sound, then CEO Yi, I will go to the legal department. Wait a minute. Yi Xiangnan stopped her. Secretary Li looked puzzled. Yi Xiangnan coughed lightly, give her a chance. Secretary Li held back her laughter. Yes, I also think that we should give her a chance. Miss Sue is very smart. She will understand that CEO Yi is the man who loves her the most. Yi Xiangnan threw the documents over again. When did I say that I love her? Secretary Li made a sound as if she didn't understand. If you don't love her, why don't you let the legal department handle it? Why give her a chance? Yi Xiangnan gritted his teeth and said, Secretary Li, you are getting bolder and bolder. Secretary Li stood there aggrievedly. CEO Yi, I can't do this or that. I don't know what to do. It was rare for her to act like this, and she even wanted to act coquettishly. Yi Xiangnan was stunned. After a long time, he sighed, Su Mu is not as good as a secretary as a wife. Secretary Li got what she wanted. She picked up the documents and ran out. At the door, her boss stopped her. What kind of flowers should I give to a woman? Secretary Li smiled. Red roses or lilies are both good. As for Miss Sue, I suggest lilies. It suits her temperament. After saying that, she looked at CEO Yi eagerly, thinking that he would ask her to order it. However, Yi Xiangnan thought for a long time and then said in a low voice, Go out. Secretary Li saw that he was probably really angry with Su Mu. Both of them were angry, which was really hard to deal with. After Secretary Li left, Yi Xiangnan went to the sofa and sat down, leaning against the back of the sofa. He had been sick recently. No, he was sick in his mind. After falling out with Su Mu, he also went to look for a woman. However, he was not interested at all. He thought that there was something wrong with his body, but it was not. It was normal. One day, he saw the things that Sumu had used, and it was normal. He took Lin Lu to the family dinner just to annoy Sumu. But Sumu didn't care at all. It seemed that he was the only one who was angry. The more Yi Xiannan thought about it, the angrier he became. In the days that followed, he spent more time drinking, and gradually forgot about Su Shu. It was only when he saw Yi Sun that he remembered this person. A month later, he purposely went to Li Du's office and knocked on the table. "Get the documents done this week." Secretary Li was surprised and stared at him for a long time. Yi Xiangnan seemed to be a little impatient. "Is there a problem?" Secretary Li saw his expression and seemed to realize something. She said in a low voice, "Yes, CEO Yi. I see. I will get it done this week." Yi Xiangnan took a deep look at Secretary Li and said nothing. After he left, Secretary Li felt as if all her strength had been sucked out. She was very clear that this time it was really over. CEO Yi had made up his mind to remove Sumu from his heart. A man like CEO Yi probably didn't want to be controlled by a woman too much. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.